The day Armin Malik decided to stay home, he had no idea his entire world was about to shatter and then be rebuilt in a way he never imagined. It started with something small, almost insignificant, a sound he was never meant to hear, a moment he was never supposed to witness. And in that moment, the man who owned companies, buildings, and fortunes realized he knew nothing about the people inside his own home. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the hidden goodness in people, take a moment right now to like this video, share it with someone who needs a little hope, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel, because stories like this can change the way we see the world. Armin Malik was a man who measured life in profits and losses. At 38, he was the owner of a fast-growing construction empire, a man whose name carried weight in boardrooms and whose presence commanded respect. His days were packed with meetings, negotiations, and endless calls. His nights were often spent reviewing contracts or flying between cities. His home, a grand villa filled with marble floors and expensive art, was nothing more than a place where he slept. He lived alone, except for the staff he barely noticed. No. Among them was Sarah, the quiet maid who had been working in his house for over 3 years. To Armin, she was just another employee, efficient, invisible, and replaceable. He had never asked about her life, never wondered where she came from, never even noticed the tiredness in her eyes. But everything changed on a morning when Armin woke up with a fever that refused to let him leave his bed. For the first time in years, he canceled his meetings. His phone kept buzzing, but he ignored it. The house felt strangely unfamiliar during the day, as if he had stepped into someone else's life. By noon, the silence began to bother him. He got out of bed, wrapped in a light robe, and walked slowly down the hallway. That's when he heard it, a soft melody, almost like a lullaby, coming from one of the unused rooms at the far end of the house. He frowned. No one was supposed to be there. Curiosity pulled him closer. The door was slightly open, and what he saw inside made him freeze. The room, which had been empty for years, was transformed. There were colorful curtains hanging over the windows, toys scattered across the floor, and in the center of the room stood 2 little girls dressed in simple pink dresses, trying to follow Sarah's gentle movements as she guided them through a dance. Sarah wasn't the quiet, invisible maid he knew. She was smiling, really smiling, in a way he had never seen before. Her voice was soft and warm as she encouraged the girls, clapping lightly when they managed to mimic her steps. The children giggled, their laughter filling the room with a life Armin had never felt in his house. For a moment he thought he was dreaming. Then one of the girls stumbled and ran into Sarah's arms, calling her Amy. The word hit him like a storm. Sarah had children. In his house, hidden from him. A surge of anger rose inside him. How dare she bring strangers into his home without permission? How long had this been going on? What else was she hiding? He pushed the door open. The music stopped instantly. The laughter died. Sarah turned, her face draining of color as she saw him standing there. The girls clung to her, sensing the sudden tension. Armin's voice was cold, sharper than he intended. He demanded an explanation, his words cutting through the silence like a blade. Sarah didn't speak immediately. She simply held her daughters closer, as if trying to shield them from something far worse than his anger. When she finally spoke, her voice trembled, not with defiance, but with fear. And then, slowly, painfully, the truth began to unfold. Sarah had lost her husband 3 years ago in an accident. Left alone with 2 young daughters and no support, she had struggled to survive. She had come to the city with nothing but hope and desperation. When she got the job at Armin's house, it felt like a miracle, but there was one problem. The job required her to live in, and she had nowhere to leave her children. At first, she tried to find someone to care for them, but she couldn't afford it. Every option led to danger, neglect, or exploitation. In the end, she made a choice that terrified her every day. She brought them with her and hid them in the unused part of the house. She only let them out when she was sure Armin was away. She kept them quiet, careful, and visible, just like she had learned to be. Every day was a risk. Every sound made her heart race, but it was the only way she could keep them safe and close. As she spoke, tears rolled down her cheeks, but she didn't wipe them away. She wasn't asking for sympathy. She was simply telling the truth. Armin listened, his anger slowly dissolving into something else, something heavier, something he wasn't used to feeling. Guilt. He looked around the room again. What he had first seen as a violation now looked like a desperate attempt to create a life within the shadows. The toys were old but carefully cleaned. The dresses were simple but neatly stitched. Everything spoke of love, sacrifice, and silent resilience. For the first time, Armand realized how blind he had been. He had lived in this massive house surrounded by people, yet he had never truly seen any of them. He had built an empire, but he had ignored the small human stories unfolding right under his roof. The girls peeked at him from behind Sarah, their eyes filled with fear and curiosity. They didn't understand who he was, only that he had the power to take their world away. Something inside him shifted. He remembered his own childhood, how his mother had struggled after his father's death, how she had worked tirelessly to give him a better life. He remembered the nights she went hungry so he could eat, the sacrifices she never spoke about. And suddenly Sarah wasn't just his maid anymore. She was a mother trying to survive. The silence stretched, heavy and uncertain. Armand took a deep breath. His next words surprised even himself. Instead of anger, there was calm. Instead of punishment, there was understanding. He told her she didn't have to hide anymore. The relief on Sarah's face was immediate and overwhelming. She broke down, holding her daughters tightly, as if the weight of years had finally been lifted off her shoulders. But Armand wasn't done. That day marked the beginning of something neither of them expected. Armand started spending more time at home, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. He found himself drawn to the laughter of the girls, to the warmth that had quietly existed in a corner of his house without his knowledge. He began to notice things he had never cared about before. The way the girls' eyes lit up at simple gifts, the way Sarah worked tirelessly without complaint, the way the house felt alive. He arranged for the girls to be enrolled in a good school. He set up a proper space for them, no longer hidden but openly part of the household. He increased Sarah's salary, not as charity, but as recognition of her strength, and slowly something inside him began to heal. The man who once measured life in profits started measuring it in moments. The boardrooms, the deals, the endless chase for more, they all began to feel less important compared to the simple joy of hearing laughter echo through his home. But the real change wasn't in his lifestyle. It was in his heart. He learned to listen, to notice, to care. And in doing so, he discovered a kind of wealth he had never known before. If this story is touching your heart so far, don't forget to like, share, and comment. Your support helps these meaningful stories reach more people who need them. As months passed, the bond between them grew stronger. The girls began to see Armand not as a distant figure, but as someone they could trust. Sarah, though still respectful, no longer carried the same fear in her eyes. One evening, as they all sat together during dinner, a simple, peaceful moment, Armand realized something profound. He was no longer alone. The house that once felt empty now felt like a home. And the woman he had once barely noticed had changed his life in ways he could never repay. Before we reach the ending, here's a special request. Comment a kindness changes life. If you truly believe one act of understanding can transform everything. In the end, Armand understood that success wasn't about how much you own, but how many lives you touch. And Sarah, with her quiet strength and unconditional love, had taught him the most important lesson of all, that sometimes the greatest secrets aren't meant to hurt us. They're meant to open our eyes. If this story moved you, if it made you feel something deep inside, take a moment to like, share, and subscribe. Because stories like this remind us that even in a world driven by power and money, kindness still has the power to change everything. The change in Armand Malik's life did not happen overnight. It unfolded quietly, like sunlight slowly filling a dark room. What had begun as a shocking discovery was now becoming something far deeper, something neither he nor Sarah had expected. At first, everything felt new and uncertain. Sarah still woke up every morning with a trace of fear, as if she might open her eyes and find it was all a dream, that she would once again have to hide her daughters, silence their laughter, and live in constant anxiety. But day after day, Armand's actions proved that this new reality was real. He didn't just allow them to stay, accepted them. The girls, Aina and Mihor, began to transform in ways that were impossible to ignore. The timid, quiet children who once tiptoed through hidden hallways now ran freely through the house, their laughter echoing across the marble floors. Their eyes, once filled with caution, now sparkled with curiosity and joy. Armin noticed everything. He noticed how Anna loved to draw, filling pages with bright, colorful worlds that seemed far happier than anything she had ever experienced before. He noticed how Mehor struggled with reading at first but refused to give up, her tiny fingers tracing each word with determination, and he noticed how Sarah watched them, always with a quiet, protective love that never asked for anything in return. For a man who had spent years chasing success, these small details began to feel more important than any deal he had ever closed. But change always brings challenges. As word slowly spread among the household staff, not everyone welcomed the new arrangement. Some whispered behind closed doors, questioning Armin's decision. Others believed Sarah had somehow manipulated her way into a better life. The judgment was subtle but present, like a shadow that refused to fully disappear. Sarah felt it. Even though Armin treated her with respect, she could sense the shift in the air. The glances, the quiet conversations that stopped when she entered a room, it all reminded her of the fragile line she was walking. She had been given a chance, but she feared it could be taken away just as easily. Armin, however, was not the same man he had been before. One afternoon, he overheard a conversation between two staff members questioning Sarah's place in the house. For a brief moment, the old Armin, the one who avoided personal matters, might have ignored it, but not anymore. He stepped in, his presence alone silencing the room. Without raising his voice, he made it clear that respect was not optional in his home. He reminded them that every person under his roof deserved dignity, regardless of their role. It wasn't anger that defined his words, it was conviction. And from that day on, the whispers faded. For Sarah, that moment meant more than she could ever express. It wasn't just about protection. It was about being seen, valued, and respected in a way she had never experienced before. As time passed, the connection between them grew stronger, though it remained unspoken and carefully balanced. Armin never crossed the boundaries of respect, and Sarah never forgot her place. But something deeper existed beneath the surface: trust. One evening, months later, Armin returned home earlier than usual. He found the girls in the living room, working on a school project. Papers were scattered everywhere, and the floor was covered in colors and glue. For a moment, he just stood there, watching. This chaos, this imperfect, joyful mess, was something his life had been missing for years. Anna looked up and smiled, holding up her drawing with pride. Mir quickly followed, showing her work as if it were the most important thing in the world. And for Armin, it was. He sat down with them, something he never would have imagined doing before. He listened, he laughed, he helped, and in that simple moment, he felt a kind of peace that no amount of money had ever given him. Sarah watched from a distance, her heart full. She had come into this house with nothing but fear and desperation. Now she was witnessing something she had never dared to hope for, a life where her daughters could grow without fear, where they could dream without limits. But life, as always, had one more test. A few weeks later, Armin received a business offer that would require him to move abroad for an extended period. It was the kind of opportunity he would have accepted without hesitation in the past. It promised expansion, greater profits, and a stronger position in the market. Everything he had worked for, yet as he sat in his office staring at the contract, something felt different. For the first time, he hesitated. His mind drifted, not to numbers or projections, but to the sound of laughter in his home, to the sight of two little girls waiting for him in the evening, to the quiet strength of a woman who had changed his life without even trying. He realized that leaving now wouldn't just be a business decision. It would be personal. That night, he walked into the living room where Sarah and the girls were sitting together. The warmth of that moment made his decision clear before he even spoke it aloud. He chose to stay. Not because he had to, but because he wanted to. Because for the first time in his life, he understood what truly mattered. And in that choice, everything came full circle. Before we close this story, if it has touched your heart even a little, take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who believes in second chances, and subscribe for more stories that remind us of what truly matters. Armin Malik, the man who once measured life in wealth, had discovered something far more valuable: a home filled with love, a heart filled with purpose, and a truth that would stay with him forever. Sometimes the most unexpected secrets don't destroy our lives, they save them.